Hello, and welcome to Peculiar Storytime, PST, a new segment I'm adding to my Peculiar Occurrence series. This particular series will be concentrated around peculiar stories that I have found online in places like Reddit or 4chan that I would like to share with you guys. I hope that you like this new segment that I'm introducing, and I would like to know what you think about it down below in the comments. And if you're new here, I hope that you'll hit that subscribe button and the bell. So without any further ado, let's get into our very first episode. Now, our first story is from Reddit, from the subreddit Paranormal, from the Redditor CrazyTurtleMomma. It's titled, "It Wasn't Her." I want to apologize to any one of my family members who might think I am implying that this thing was in any way my sister. My sister was unique, very funny, special, and the most loving person, but she did have a very dark side. And we all knew that. My sister was the eldest of 6, 5 girls and 1 boy. She had a spirit friend at a young age and had quite intelligent conversations with her. My mother even asked her to ask her friend things she never would have known the answer to at that age. And it floored my mother when she gave her friends very mature responses. She told me later that she felt like her friend was there because she needed her at the time. After she grew older, her friend told her it was time for her to go. She lived through the hardest of times with my mother's very abusive marriages, divorces, and ever-changing locations and lifestyle. In some ways, I think it made my sister very protective over Mom. Almost borderline obsessive. Doing anything in her power to get my mother's approval, even if it hurt one of us. In some ways, we believed she resented us for taking Mom's attention. I think she resented my brother the most for being the only boy of the family and getting all the praise that came with that row. It broke my mother's heart when he got married and moved away, so needless to say, my sister wasn't too fond of his wife and made every attempt to distance my mother and his relationship. Then it was our second eldest sister, because she was always getting into trouble for attention growing up, and even into adulthood, consistently stressing our mother out. And myself, because I was the baby of the family. My mother and I had a special bond nobody could break. My sister had always been a little unstable, but there was a shift. Things just changed after the house on Alexandria. I slept with my mother there, and I remember night after night she would sit on the edge of my mother's side of the bed, projecting negativity and expressing delusional problems for things that hadn't even happened, until my mother would cry for her to stop. It could have been that something may have attached itself to her there, but I don't know. Okay. Fast forward to the end of my sister's life. My mother passed away at the age of 87 from cancer, leaving my sister feeling alone, not wanting to live anymore. She would never take her own life, but she longed to be with our mother in the afterlife so bad. She had been suffering for a long time with her own medical issues while Mom was alive, but now she felt like there was nothing left to fight for, so if she just stopped her treatments, the end would come. We all tried to bring her home with us, but she just wasn't having it. She suffered from paranoia and she wanted to stay in that cold, empty place. She would just sit there holding Mom's things, staring off in the distance, like she was simply waiting. I was there one night helping like many nights before when she asked me to come sit close to her. She said it was very important, so I moved closer. She told me that she was worried. She was at the end of her life, and she felt like she needed my forgiveness. She said that she had done things, bad things. I told her that we have all done things we are not proud of, but she insisted that what she had done was not good, and it manipulated many outcomes in my life. She looked very worried. She would not tell me what those things were, but I'm pretty sure I know. And they did impact my life in a negative way. She said that for many years she had felt a dark presence clouding her thoughts. She opened her hand, spreading her fingers, and hovered her hand over the top right side of her head and said, "Right here." I had always felt something around her as well, but I only told my mother about my concerns. The end of her days, she suffered greatly. I wasn't there when she passed. I was 2 states away, so one of my sisters sent me a picture of her in her final days. She was propped up in her hospital bed with her eyes wider than I have ever seen them, staring up to the right above her head, right where she said she felt the negative dark presence. This was not just a gaze. This looked straight up like fear. I called and asked the nurse how long she had been staring like that, and they told me that it had been so long, they started using eye drops so her eyes wouldn't dry out. What was she looking at? It haunts me to this day. The night she passed, I was late, so I waited until morning to tell my brother. He didn't seem surprised and asked me what time she took her last breath. He said he had a feeling, and with that I replied, "How so?" He proceeded to tell me that after he turned the light out and closed his eyes, something dark rushed at him. He said it was cold and frightening. All of a sudden, her face came to his mind, and it felt like her. He just knew she had passed. Man, did that ever freak me out. A few days later, my second to eldest sister and my brother's ex-wife, they lived together, called me telling me that things crashed in their bathroom at 5 in the morning, and the dog won't stop growling at the top corners of the room. Now I'm thinking that I am next. But nothing happened. Almost a week goes by, and I'm laying in bed. My grandchildren sleep with me. My grandson looks up towards my bedroom door and says, "Spooky." I didn't even look. I told him that it was alright, and that the bed was covered in white light, and we were protected. I moved my hand as if I had a magic wand, and was covering us like a blanket. He sat up and looked around and said, "Oh, thank you," and went to sleep, and so did I. My son and his fiancée, on the other hand, did not go to sleep at all that night. Now I keep a very bright night light on in my room, so there was no explanation for this. I live in an old farm-like house with a loft upstairs where my son has his room. The door to the stairs goes into the kitchen facing my room. My son said that he and his fiancée came downstairs to the kitchen. They both looked towards my room to see if I was up, but in the doorway, they described it as a light-absorbing darkness. They both stood there in disbelief, stricken with fear, trying to see in my room. It was almost as if whatever it was couldn't get in there, but it was standing there just feet from my bed. It stayed there for a while, then went away. Later that month, my grandchildren and I drove down to my mother and sister's home to put all of their remaining belongings into storage. And that's when we were met with that same darkness that shook us to our core. It left me questioning life events from the past. Was it this thing that made her that way? And did it have a hand in changing the course of our lives? Or was what we saw in that house something else altogether? I hope she finds peace. I find it strange that everyone in my family in one way or another has experienced something warm and loving with my mother. A touch on the hand, a stroke on the cheek or back, followed sometimes by the smell of her perfume. But no one, and I mean no one at all, has been visited by my loving sister. It breaks my heart to think that we don't really know what is on the other side. Is she being held somewhere and we can't help her? Or did she simply move on? I hope it's the latter. Oh, wow, that was a really creepy and peculiar story. Now, I've looked through the comments of this and on the Redditor's page, and if she just made this up, there is no sign of it. It seems to be something that the Redditor themselves believes to be very true. There's also another Redditor that believed that this bad spirit, this negative spirit that was attached to her sister, that her sister was released from it upon death, and that no one else in the family was in a negative enough space for it to attach itself to any of them, but that it had showed up trying to attach itself to one of them, and that's what they were seeing. Very peculiar. I don't know. I want to know what you think about this peculiar story down below. If you like this, give it a thumbs up. Let's talk about it in the comments. Share this out to all your peculiar friends. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and click that little bell. And don't forget to check out my other show, Peculiar Occurrences. And until next time, keep your eyes peeled for all things peculiar. Do 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 do. Yeah.
Are you listening? Damn.